Hello and welcome to a Chanukah edition of Torah Thoughts. I'd like to share with you a Dvar Torah, a Torah thought that was given by Rabbi Meir Kahana on Chanukah in 1988 during the commemoration of the 5th anniversary of the deaths of Nurit and Esther Polak, two sisters who were murdered in a bus bombing in Jerusalem. This also took place shortly after the Israeli government had banned Rabbi Kahana and his Kach party from running in the Knesset elections. So the Dvar Torah is as follows. What is the meaning of the name Chanukah? One of the explanations is that Chanukah stands for the words Chanu, Kaf He. They rested on the 25th. They, meaning the Maccabees, rested on the 25th of Kislev, which is when Chanukah takes place, because that's when they won the battle for Jerusalem and turned their attention to restoring the sanctity of the temple. Another explanation is that Chanukah, the word Chanukah means inauguration. The sages explain that in fact the inauguration of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the temporary temple that the Jews had when they were in the desert, was supposed to take place on the 25th of Kislev. Now I want to divert for just 1 second, maybe a little more than a second, to explain the tabernacle. Almost everyone is familiar with the two temples that stood on our Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Not so many people are familiar with the tabernacle. The first temple was built by King Solomon, the king of Israel, and it stood on the Temple Mount, on our Temple Mount, for about 400 years, until it was destroyed by the Babylonians. About 70 years later, the Jews returned to Jerusalem and built the second temple under the leadership of the Jewish prophets Ezra and Nehemiah. This is the same temple that the Maccabees fought the Greeks over roughly 200 years later. This temple was later on completely renovated by King Herod, which is why in some cases it's called Herod's Temple, and it was then destroyed in the year 70 of the Common Era by the Romans, who then kicked out all the Jews out from the land of Israel and renamed it Palestine. And then there's the third temple, which has not yet been built, but will also be built on our Temple Mount, God willing, real soon. But getting back to the first temple, it was built almost 500 years after the Jews had left Egypt. So what did the Jews use during those 500 years? Where did they worship? Where did they bring their sacrifices? And the answer to that is, it was the tabernacle, which was built by Moses. So, like I said, the inauguration of the tabernacle was supposed to take place on the 25th of Kislev, but God decided to postpone it until the first day of the Hebrew month of Nisan to coincide with Yitzchak's birthday. Yitzchak being the patriarch who had offered himself as a sacrifice to God. So, accordingly, there remained a debt owed to this date, to the 25th of Kislev. So God guided history so that Chanukah, when the temple was repurified and rededicated, would take place on this day. So the question arises, why did God choose this day in the first place? It's not like God chose this day and realized, I made a mistake. He had a reason for choosing this day, knowing full well that he would then postpone it to Yitzchak's birthday. Why did God choose this day to begin with? What's so special about this date? The answer lies in the number 25. It's the 25th of the month. The number 25 symbolizes the foundation of Judaism, accepting the burden of the kingdom of heaven. How so? The number of 25 is written with the letters Kaf He. In Hebrew, every letter has a numeric value. And when you write a date, you use the letters that represent that value. So in this case, Kaf has a numeric value of 20, and He has a numeric value of 5. And so when you want to say 25, it's common to say Kaf He. Kaf He Kislev, which is the date that Chanukah happened on. But Kaf He is also a word in and of itself. Which word? It's the word ko, which means exactly like so. No deviation, no compromise, like this and no other way. Ko means exactly. Therefore, it was decreed by God that the preparation of the tabernacle be completed by the 25th to symbolize that the tabernacle was made completely by God's commandment, exactly, no deviation, no additions, no adjustments, just as God had commanded. When we see the word ko, we see it used also in other places in the Torah, for example, the priestly blessing. Okay? Brichat HaKohanim, the Torah says that God told Moshe to instruct his brother Aaron, the high priest, and all the other priests after him, Ko tavachu et bnei Israel, so shall you bless the children of Israel. Why ko? The reason is that the essence of the blessing, the Kohanim are to bless us with ko. The essence of the blessing is that every Jew should have the strength and the devotion to fulfill God's commandments exactly as instructed, No deviations, no compromise. And I'll come back to that a little bit later. And so, when Israel gathered at Mount Sinai, right before receiving the Torah, God says to Moshe, Kol tomar lebeit Yaakov, so shall you say to the house of Yaakov, of Jacob, and say unto the children of Israel, and they shall be for me a chosen nation from all the nations, and you shall be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the things which you shall speak to the children of Israel. And it starts with the word ko. So Rashi, the famous commentary, explains why did God open up with the word ko? Exactly for this reason. Moses was to tell the Jews exactly this. No more, no less. Exactly like so, you shall say. Why? Because the exclusivity of the nation of Israel and her holiness from among all the nations is the prerequisite to receiving the Torah and for all the other commandments. So Moses couldn't water any of that down. God says to him, you tell the Jews exactly what I'm telling you to tell them. And there's another message in these verses. Now again, I want to diverge for 1 second. During the period when this speech was being given, the Ministry of Education, the Israeli Ministry of Education, had began organizing Jewish and Arab student meetings to develop this coexistence and equality thing. It was a whole big political flowers and music and hearts and all that stuff. And it's worth noting that this decision was taken by Zvulun Hammer, the Ministry of Education, from the religious Zionist Mafdal party. And so Rabbi Kahana is now speaking in context of this particular program. And he says, the Torah says, you are a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. You are holy, not them. We were chosen specifically to be holy, not the Arabs. There is no assimilation in the classroom. We don't water down their culture and our culture to make an Israeli. We're Jews, Israelites, Am Yisrael, whatever you want to call it. But we have a holy mission. There's no assimilation. There's no coexistence in the classroom. Kol tomar, so shall you say. It's not a popular concept. But you shall say this without fear, exactly like so. Even if the Supreme Court comes to disqualify Moshe Rabbeinu himself, what Rav Kahana was referring to here was that the Supreme Court of Israel disqualified him from running for Knesset because he said the Jews are a special holy nation. He took this from Moshe Rabbeinu, and the Supreme Court said, no, Moshe Rabbeinu's gone. Well, even if the Supreme Court says no to Moshe Rabbeinu, so shall you speak, and so shall you tell them, without deviation. Now, when the prophet Yecheskel, Ezekiel, was chosen to be a prophet, same thing. God says to him, Son of man, all the words that I will speak to you, you shall take to your heart, and hear it in your ears, and say to them, so says Hashem your God, Ko Amar Hashem Elokim. Whether they listen, or whether they will refrain from listening. Speak to them with ko, with the word ko. Whether they listen or whether they don't. And the house of Israel will be inclined to listen to you. I'm sorry, the house of Israel will not be inclined to listen to you because they are not inclined to listen to me. And that is not to say, Hashem is not telling him, don't speak what I'm telling you to speak or speak it any different. He says to him, ko, say it this way, even though they won't listen. For all the children of Israel are thick-skulled. It's the best translation I can come up with. The original Hebrew is Chizkei Metzach. The literal translation is they are strong, of a strong forehead. Meaning it won't go in. And they are stiff-hearted. And they shall know that a prophet was among them. What is God telling Yecheskel? You must tell them. Because if they don't hear this information, then they'll say, we didn't know. They must know that a prophet was among them, even if they won't listen. We didn't know there was a solution. We didn't know that if we did tshuva, we can avoid all these punishments. We didn't know that there was such a possibility to repent. But when you'll tell them, they will know that someone told them the truth. It's just that they didn't listen. And there's another reason why, again, you'll know that there was a prophet among you. And again, I'm diverting for a second here. Because when the prediction takes place, if you didn't predict it exactly as it would happen, there's no way for them to know that Yecheskel knew the future, that Yecheskel got his words directly from God. When you say it exactly, and then it happens, they will know that it was a prophet who spoke. Now today, again, going back to Rav Kahana's Dvar Torah, today we're in the midst of a holiday and celebration of Chanukah. Yet, on the other hand, we're commemorating the deaths of Esther and Nurit Pollock. May God avenge their blood. These two symbolize the two holidays of redemption. Esther symbolizing Purim, a reference to Queen Esther, obviously, and Nurit, which comes from the word or, meaning light, symbolizing Chanukah. Ironically, by the way, Rabbi Kahana was killed shortly before Chanukah, and his first name, Meir, also represents light. So anyway, there is no redemption without sacrifice, because every redemption is preceded by a war against evil, which brings the redemption. But woe unto the... Rabbi Kahana, by the way, had no idea that he was talking about his own family here. Woe unto those families that specifically they were chosen to be the sacrifice. Rav Kahana was later killed, his son and daughter-in-law were later killed, and his grandson today is being persecuted like nobody's business by the Israeli government. Woe unto those families that specifically they are chosen to be the sacrifice. But know this, because of righteous women who gave their lives to sanctify God's name, not just Esther and Nurit, but women like them, because of them we have a state, and in their merit will come the redemption. We must walk for the sake, for their sake and for our sake, in the words of Kol, without deviation, so that we shouldn't, God forbid, fall into the trap of, what if we say this and they might disqualify us? Never worry about that. So what if they disqualify us, says Rav Kahana? As it says in Yecheskel, whether they listen or whether they refrain from listening, so that they know that that a prophet had been among them. The Kach movement is a prophet. Now Rav Kahana here is not talking about a prophet with a capital P, because that's someone who got his words directly from God. He's talking about a prophet who speaks God's words because he read them in the Torah, because he knows it to be the truth. Because the Kach movement is a prophet. What is a prophet? Prophecy, the word Nevi'ah, comes from the word Niv Sfatayim, which means dialect of the lips, speech. And whoever speaks the truth is a true prophet. And whoever speaks almost the truth is a false prophet. So shall you speak, so shall you say. No more and no less. Don't edit God's words to make it seem more palatable to others. And this also applies to the case of vengeance, Rav Kahana says. If the halacha, the Torah law, dictates that for the sake of these girls there is a halachic obligation for vengeance, who will not say that? Only because the lower court, meaning the court on earth, because of that we should not say the truth? Truth is a matter of halacha. It's not a matter of some human judge. The book of Ruth opens up with, and it was in the days that the judges judged. To which the Talmud comments in Bava Batra, woe unto a generation that judges its judges. Meaning that these judges were not judges, they were punishments. They were judgments from God. These judges were themselves a curse. Rav Kahana is referring to our judges who today also, they don't represent justice. They're a punishment somehow on us. So don't let them stop you from saying the truth. There's an obligation here for vengeance. And not just to think it in your mind, vengeance of my heart, as it's written in Isaiah. But no, on my lips, we have to say it. We have to urge it. And if there's a contradiction between Jewish law and Hellenism, Hellenism being the modern superpower culture that the Maccabees fought, in today's days we're talking about modern Western culture, if there's a contradiction, then let God's law win the day. So shall you say. Ko. Now God arranged that the construction of the tabernacle, and generations later the temple, should be completed on the 25th, because without the concept of Ko, we have only lies and distortion. And regrettably, halakha, Jewish law, and the world of Torah looks the way it does in our days. And I will elaborate on that a little bit. Unfortunately, we have people who are supposed to give Torah judgments who do it based on what they will end up looking, how they will look in the face of the world, as opposed to what the actual halakha is. It looks the way it does because we don't say Kol, because we don't say the truth, whether they listen or whether they refrain. And they shall know that a prophet has been among them. We must promise and demonstrate that with God's help we will expel the Hellenists from among us and Hellenism from our hearts. And that is the core of the battle. Vayamim hahem bazman hazeh, in those days, but in our times. There too, in the times of the Maccabees, the essence of the battle was against the Hellenistic Jews, not the Hellenist Greeks. And so too in our days. The problem isn't the Arabs, it's Yossi Sarit and his ilk. Now, to give a little bit of context, Yossi Sarid was the leader at the time of the extreme left in Israel. He was the head of Shalom Achshav, which later gave birth to a political party, Meretz, and this movement gave us all these wonderful things like Oslo, a two-state solution, BDS, Machsom Watch, breaking the silence, and the very challenge of the premise that Israel belongs to the Jewish nation. Thank you, Yossi Sarid. And so Rav Kahana says, and the problem is Yossi Sarid, and it is an obligation and a mitzvah to say Yossi Sarid Yamach Shemo v'zichro. May his name and remnant of him be obliterated. As the Gemara says in Brachot, whoever mentions the name of an evil person and doesn't curse him is in violation of a commandment. As it is written in Proverbs, and the name of evil shall rot. You cannot mention an evil person's name without adding some sort of a curse, some sort of a negative. It must be known. Ko, you got to say it. Don't be afraid to say it. It is an obligation. Ko, so shall you say. And this is the difference between us and the rest of the world. This is the difference between us and the rest of even the Jews. The other political parties Rav Kahana was talking about at the time, the other movements. The rest reveal 1 inch but conceal 2 inches. But it is upon us to say the entire truth. Since the murder of these 2 sisters, many, many more have been killed. 2 days before the elections, another 4 Jews were killed in cold blood, and we, like suckers, remained silent. Any other normal nation would have immediately rebelled, but we remained silent. These supposedly righteous people who say that we don't need to expel the Arabs, they're the ones who are guilty of murder. Anyone who remains silent and doesn't say we need to expel the Arabs, he's I would say complicit. I don't know if the translation comes through correctly, but certainly complicit of murder. And it is upon them that we must make reference to the verse in Ecclesiastes. Don't be more righteous than your Creator. God told us to expel our enemy. Don't be more righteous than God himself. And also from Ecclesiastes, anyone who has compassion on the cruel will ultimately be cruel to the compassionate. Kol ha-merachem al ha-achzarim, sofo liyot achzar al ha-rachmanim. Remove them. Expel them. Ko. So shall you say. The main thing is to say the truth. And only so will the blessings of Ko tevarchu, so shall you bless them, again with the priestly blessings, only so will these blessings come true. But if we do not say the truth, then all of these blessings will be in vain. We shall say all of the truth. And with God's help, we will rise to power. I know Rav Kahana is no longer alive. The Kach party is no longer running for office, but the movement still exists. And more people are beginning to realize it, just as Rav Kahana predicted. And even if we do not rise to power, the main thing is we do not deviate. And we should always say the truth. Out of faith in God. Because the situation, unfortunately, will become unbearable, and even this nation, meaning the Jews, even this nation, which is good but stiff-necked, will say that we cannot continue this way. Meaning at some point the Jews in Israel will realize that we cannot live with an enemy population embedded among us. And by the way, they have realized it now. Now, even the left has realized it, and the left is using it as an argument to kick the Jews out. We'll get to that in a minute. We must put an end to this Hellenism, whether they listen or whether they refrain from listening, and they shall know that a prophet had been among them. Do not stop to be prophets. Everyone that continues in the way of the Kach movement is a prophet. And the main thing is do not let them make you deviate. And in the merit of this and with God's help, we will ultimately bring the complete redemption speedily in our days. Amen. Now, I want to elaborate a little bit about what Rav Kahana said about the priestly blessing, which starts with the instructions start with the word Ko. The blessing is a blessing of Ko, that we should be able to keep the Torah exactly. Because plenty of people today don't. The Maccabees fought exactly for that. Okay? The Jews in Israel in the time of the Maccabees wanted to reform Judaism. We can worship God, but why not let someone else worship Zeus if he wants to? We can have our holidays, but why shouldn't we also have Hellenist holidays if we want to? And sadly today when you go to Israel, you'll see Christmas trees all over the place. And Jews, sometimes Orthodox Jews, are so proud that we have Christmas trees in Israel. Aren't you proud of that? Call. God says, you be a holy nation to me, not bring everything into Israel. No, I get it. I get it that you want to convince people to keep the Torah rather than force them to keep something they don't believe. You can't force somebody to believe in something. But don't make it like it's a good thing that there's idol worship going on in your country. Call. We have Jews, and I'm not only talking about reform and conservative movements here, but certainly them, but Orthodox Jews who brag about how in Israel is a very friendly place for LGBTQRSTUVXYZ. In Muslim countries, they throw gays from the rooftops. In Israel, no. You know something? Kol Tomar. The Torah tells us that homosexuality is abhorrent. It's an abomination. Who are we to suddenly, because we want to look like, in today's day and age, you got LGBT, it's all wonderful. No. You don't have Jewish organizations, supposedly Jewish organizations, giving awards to someone for promoting something that's an abomination. Call. Now, of course, in our way, the Jewish culture, when we're against somebody doing something, that doesn't mean we're going to throw him from a rooftop. We need to educate, certainly. But when the Muslims throw gays from the rooftops and Jews brag about how we have a gay pride parade in Tel Aviv, guess who the LGBTQRSTUVXYZ community is supporting? Us or the Muslims? They're supporting the Muslims, in spite of the fact that they want to kill them. We're having parades for them. But they stand for what they believe in. We need kol. Female rabbis, intermarriage, driving a car on Shabbat. You can make excuses and explanations for all of that and so much more. I keep kosher at home, but outside it's not convenient. Kosher meat is very expensive. I can sit here all day. And God meant for us to enjoy ourselves. He didn't mean this. Kol. The Torah gives you a mitzvah. You got to keep the mitzvah the way it was written. But you tell somebody that with love. I have plenty of friends who violate plenty of these commandments. Who doesn't? I don't. We all do, okay? And when you speak out that something is wrong, of course that doesn't mean that you want to throw that person from a rooftop. But you don't accept it. You don't celebrate something that's wrong just because modern day culture celebrates it. You stick to what the Torah says. Kol teaches us that God's word supersedes all political considerations and political correctness and even science. Because I know Orthodox people who want to say that, the Torah says that the world was created in a certain way, but it's not literal because obviously we want to conform with science. No. The scientists will one day learn, and we all know, anyone who knows science knows that every day scientists find out how wrong they were yesterday. And scientists will one day realize that the Torah was completely right in everything that it describes. And if you have faith in the Torah, if the Torah is true, cool. You say it the way it is. You don't modify it. Going back to the whole thing with the equality with the Arabs, God didn't bring us to Israel so that we should be a nation like all other nations. He brought us to Israel to be a special nation, a holy nation. And we need to deserve that. We need to earn it. We need to behave that way. Now, if our culture is to be the same as all the others in Israel, what was the point of having a Jewish state? All the Jews should come live in America. Israel is there so that we can promote a Jewish culture, build a Jewish culture. Now, sure, every non-Jew in Israel, provided, of course, that he's not an enemy, should have full, equal human rights. But political rights? No. National rights? No. A Jewish state means that Jewish culture is paramount. Now, I'm sure many people will cry racism, but so be it. Cool. As for expelling the Arabs, Rabbi Kahana, to be clear, always wanted to expel, and this is Torah, Any non-Jew who wants to live in Israel, be it an Arab or whatever, what have you, can live in Israel if he accepts that it's a Jewish state. He will live under Jewish laws and understands that he, as long as he's not a Jew, he's not a citizen. He's a green card holder, let's call it. That's fine. But anyone who rejects that premise cannot live in Israel. That's Torah, right? And those who will scream racism, the hypocrisy of that has already been exposed. That's already been blown out of the water, right? In 2005, when 10,000 Jews were expelled from Gaza, I didn't see it. A single progressive movement, Jewish or non-Jewish, protesting this. I didn't see them laying down on the streets to block traffic. Right-wing movements did that. Not a single so-called progressive movement did that. And the left themselves now are arguing that we have to kick Jews out of Jewish towns in Israel. Why? Because we can't live together with the Arabs. They actually say that. They use Rav Kahana's own slogans. There must be a separation. For us to exist as a Jewish state requires a separation. The only difference is when a divorce takes place and there's an argument over who gets the house, they say the Arabs should get the house and the Jews should get kicked out. But I say that I want to keep my land and let them leave. I'm the racist. Doesn't matter. Cool. The Torah tells us to say what we say. That's my Torah thought for Chanukah. What's yours? If you like the video, click like. Feel free to share it. Thank you for watching, and have a happy Chanukah.